Everybody for attending. We would like to call the meeting to order. So this is the annual Davis Pond Advisory Committee, the annual meeting. I'm Glenn Leday, the Executive Director of CPRA. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Just a few opening comments. As we know, the Davis Pond diversion is a diversion that's set to divert up to 10,650 CFS of fresh water into the Barataria Basin for promoting a healthy ecosystem and for promoting increased productivity of commercial fish and wildlife species. So we're excited today to review the work that went on in 2023 and then look forward at the next year's operating plan. So have a good agenda. Thank you for the advisory committee for attending and all the work that you do for this project. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Troutman and have him go through the roll call.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. I'm going to call out your agency. Actually, this go around, I'd like you to state your name for the record. And obviously you'd be present if you're stating your name. So U.S. Army Corps of Engineers.
John Fogarty.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Kathy Brook.
USDA NRCS, Natural Resource Conservation Service.
John Boatman.
U.S. Environmental Protection Agency.
Raul Gutierrez.
NOAA Marine Fisheries.
Dawn Davis.
Louisiana Department of Energy and Natural Resources.
Sarah Krupa.
Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries.
Connor Lockfield.
There he is. Thank you, Connor. Louisiana Department of Health is not here. Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality. From the parish governments, St. Charles Parish Government.
Marnie Stein.
Lafourche Parish Government.
Megan Johnline.
Megan. Jefferson Parish Government.
Jason Smith.
And Plaquemines Parish Government.
Kimberly Buck.
Other representatives, Oyster Fisheries.
Beginovich.
Marsh Property Owners.
Frank Ellender.
Shrimp Fisheries Upper Basin. I didn't see that rep. Okay, not here. Shrimp Fisheries Lower Basin. Not present. Recreational Fisheries.
Maurice Dockin.
Maurice, come join us.
All right. I just didn't see it.
I didn't see you earlier,
I
but
just walked
there's a seat up here. Thank you for being here. And Barataria Terrebonne National Estuary Program.
Michael Massey.
Michael, thank you. All right, that's 18 of 20.
Thank you, John. We do have a quorum. Before we get started, I'd like to recognize Parish President Matt Jewell, who's in the audience today. As you know, the structure's in St. Charles Parish. Thank you for joining, Matt.
Thanks for having me.
So with that, we'll move on to agenda item number 2, approval of minutes from the previous meeting. And so I think that was included in the committee's packet. With this time now, I will take a motion to approve the minutes from the December 7th, 2023 meeting. A motion from Mr. Pete.
Second.
Seconded. All in favor? All opposed? With that, the minutes were approved. We'll move on to item 3, approval of the meeting agenda. This is the revised agenda that was sent out on December 9th, 2024. As you can see, it includes that update on the maintenance activities from CPRA, the report from the technical working group for 2023, that is from CPRA, and then the presentation on the recommended operations plan for 2025, followed by public comment and a roll call vote, new business as well. So with that, I'll take a motion, the approval of the agenda. First and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. The meeting agenda has been approved. With that, we'll move on to agenda item number 4, update on maintenance activities. Mr. David Chambers with CPRA is going to give that update. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Glenn. So actually this past month, we had a major like maintenance inspection event at Davis Pond. So we wanted to go ahead and present that. I know most of the data is going to be from 2023, but this is pretty fresh. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, who's our federal sponsor on the project and partner, cost share partner, their hired labor unit performed the work. And it was basically, we need to do an inspection of the culverts to make sure they're in good condition structurally. We wanted to check out the seals, and the gates. The gates have a seal on the bottom, basically like a rubber neoprene seal. And, we haven't inspected it since it opened. So, it's over 20 years of operation. We didn't see any evidence of any issues prior to the inspection. It was just, time to do it. So this was, a major event as far as, trying to get this dewatered and inspected and everything. So at the beginning, this is mobilization. This is on the riverside. You can see they have a couple barges. They have like a tender boat and a crane. And all the work took place pretty quickly. We had a really good time schedule. They first got there on the 14th of November. And we were thinking, well, maybe we would have to dig in a little bit because of shelling near the structure. And there wasn't much of that. They were set up. I think this photo was taken the following day on the 15th. So the first order of business was we do a flush so that, we can hopefully clear all the culverts of wildlife and everything. So this is a screen that's installed, and then we operate it. It's a low flow, but it's enough, hopefully to flush out most of the fish and everything. And you'll see a little later after the flushing, we put a net on the other side, hopefully to keep anything from coming back. You're always going to have some fish in there, but anyway. So the next on the riverside, as part of the closure, these large steel plates, reinforced steel plates, are called needles. There's 3 of them. You have 14 by 14 culverts, so roughly 4 to 5 feet, width and 24 feet tall. So they get placed, at each culvert. So this is just a shot of them, placing the last one on the riverside. And, that's once it's placed. And so that's the riverside closure. Now, once they put the needles in, they're not quite done. You have a dive crew that'll help seal everything off because, and actually as they're putting them in, they also have the dive crew. There's each of these needles fits into like a slot on the bottom, and that slot needs to be like cleared out of debris and stuff like that. And they have to make sure that it's in there properly like seated and everything. This is a photo of one of the divers getting ready. And then after the needles go in, there's additional work that the divers do to seal everything off. Between each of the needles, there's like a metal plate that's kind of screwed in with these bolts, and then on the sides, and then there's other stuff that they put in there called oakum, which is kind of like a rope material that they stuff in to seal everything up. So the divers are very important, especially on the riverside. This is what the needles look like from the top. So you can see there's 3 of them. There's a beam that they rest against that just, it goes into these recessed slots that are on the back of the structure. So that's what it looks like after everything's placed and ready to be dewatered. This is the discharge side, and that's the net. We call it like the alligator net because it's, that's the main animal that you want to keep out. And you can see there are some gators on the other side. We did a similar event at Carnarvon a few years ago, and this is the same net from Carnarvon. I think last time they had it a little, out of the water a little bit, but this was effective. And also, we didn't need divers on this side. I'll explain that in a bit. So on the downstream sides, there's bulkheads that are part of the project. They were in original construction. These were manufactured and they're stored on site. And these get lowered into slots. There's like rollers on the side, and there's also seals that you can see. And you lower them down, and then once you start dewatering, just like a little bit, they kind of seat themselves, like they'll suck into place, which is what happened, which is why we didn't need divers on this side. And these bulkheads were actually very effective. Like you go down in the culverts, and there was no sign of leakage on this side. The needles, you always have a little bit coming through, but these worked really well. And you can also see in this shot, you can see all of the setup that we had on that side. You can see in the corner, there's like a pump that's, one of the pumps that we use to dewater. You can see the crane that was used to set the bulkheads. And you can also see the openings, which is where the ventilation system, was placed. And there was also some diffusers for any fish that remained in the culverts. This is a view from inside the culvert. It's very dark. You have to have good light. But, basically, it's a 14 by 14 culvert that when they're going in and inspecting the cores, we're looking at for structural issues, checking like each joint and everything. And that's the main, item in the inspection. This is a view, like when you go to the other side, that's the bulkhead that we just saw them lowering. You can also see, where the pump goes in that they use for dewatering, and the diffuser that I mentioned before. But, that's basically what the bulkheads look like in place. And this is, I mentioned that, the known maintenance item that we knew we were going to do is replacing the seals. So this is a photo of what the seals looked like before. And, they're over 20 years old. They were in good shape. Like, you never know, they could be like ripped off. They could, you could have like sheared bolts or whatever. But the backer rod was still intact. As you can see, that's a stainless steel backer plate that's, holds the seal in place. And they were able to use the same bolt holes and all that stuff. So this went, this was an easier process than like we were potentially expecting. And this is what the seals look like on the gate. These gates are cast iron, and the seal's actually fairly small. It's just like a 1 inch thick strip of neoprene that has like I said, the stainless steel backer, and it's bolted into place. And that's basically it. The inspection went well. We didn't find any issues or concerns or anything like that. All the culverts passed. And as far as the timeline, I think the last one was inspected, I think it was Sunday, the 26th. So we're talking, a little over 10 days, within a couple of weeks, we got everything done, which was great because initially, we were looking at potentially only being able to do water and inspect 2 of the culverts, depending on how quickly it could be done and what complications arose or whatever. But they were able to do everything, all 4. The whole project was very efficient, and it went well. Just anyone have any questions or?
So David, through the dewatering event, there were no any major issues were uncovered, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like I said, they did a structural inspection of everything, and everything passed, and they were in good condition.
Good to hear. Any questions from the committee for David Chambers?
No, but we have to commend the engineers. They did a good job.
That's right.
Yeah, I was very pleased with the way everything came together. And there's a lot, like when you're talking about the dive team and all the different disciplines that have to come together to do the work. It's pretty impressive, and I was pleased with how efficient and seamless this whole process went.
And a good design, Yeah, So, yeah.
That's right. Well, thank you. Thanks for everybody for that worked on this dewatering event. Appreciate it. Thank you, David.
Thanks.
With that, we will move on to agenda item number 5, report from the technical working group from Danielle.
Sure. Yeah.
Right, I'm going to provide a brief summary of our 2023 operations and monitoring for the Davis Pond Freshwater Diversion. So, as a reminder, the Davis Pond Advisory Committee, the group that is assembled here, is composed of representatives from federal and state agencies, from parish government, fisheries, landowners, and Barataria Terrebonne National Estuary Program. And the primary purpose of the DPAC is to advise CPRA's executive director, who is the DPAC chair, Glenn Ledet, on information relative to operations of the diversion. And that includes things like time of the year that we operate, the rate and duration of discharge, and emergency operations and shutdown triggers. Prior to the meeting of this group, we met with a subgroup of the DPAC called the Davis Pond Technical Working Group that is composed of representatives from the state agencies as well as a representative from the Corps. The main purpose of the Technical Working Group is to develop our draft operations plan for 2025 that we're presenting today here, to provide advice on operations and monitoring, and then resolve any technical issues that could come up and review operational changes to the plan if necessary. Some background and general facts about the Davis Pond Freshwater Diversion. It was constructed by the Corps between 1997 and 2002, and then operations began in 2002. It's located on the west bank of the Mississippi River. It's in St. Charles Parish near River Mile 118 above Hedda Passes. The structure itself, as you all saw some photos of, is composed of 4 gated 14 by 14 foot culverts, and the maximum discharge through the structure is 18,650 CFS. The diversion discharges into a ponding area. It's about 9,400 acres, where the intent was to delay the actual movement of water out into Lake Cadwallader, and that is to really allow for nutrient uptake within the marshes in that ponding area and to allow for enhanced sediment deposition in that area. So while operations began in 2002, we didn't begin operating to our full capacity until 2009, and that's because the ponding area was a little bit too successful in ponding water. We had some overflow of water outside of the ponding area, so we needed to make some gaps in the rock weir that was constructed on the north shore of Lake Cadwallader to allow for greater flow outside of the ponding area, or from the ponding area out into Lake Cadwallader and the rest of the basin. Operations, maintenance, and monitoring for the project, it's cost shared between the Corps and CPRA. The Corps is responsible for 75% and CPRA is responsible for 25%. And CPRA is also responsible for the day-to-day diversion operations. The main goal of the project was to reestablish connectivity between the river and the Barataria Basin, thereby reducing saltwater intrusion from the Gulf of Mexico. And the main objectives for the project are to enhance emergent marsh vegetation growth, to reduce marsh loss, and then to increase the productivity of both commercial and recreational fish and wildlife. Start by reviewing operations for 2023. We had one pulse in 2023. It lasted for 38 days, and that amounted to about 10% of the year. The mean discharge during that time was 8,774 CFS. Again, we pulse when the river is high, so that's going to be January, February, March, usually during that time. The diversion was closed for 110 days in 2023. Pretty significant. It was almost 30% of the year. And most of that was due to the saltwater wedge that moved up the river during that extreme drought that we had, especially in the latter part of 2023. We closed the Davis Pond diversion on September 21st. That was to retain as much fresh water in the river as possible as that saltwater wedge started moving up the river and started impacting the intakes for Plaquemines Parish. We reopened the diversion on January 29th. The mean discharge for the entire year, including when the diversion was closed, was 1,405 CFS, and the maximum discharge during our pulse was 9,904 CFS. That was on February 14th. So in addition to the diversion, which is the one variable that we can control within the basin as far as inputting fresh water, the other two major inputs are the Mississippi River, which is really the main driver of salinity in the basin, and rainfall. The graph that is shown here, the blue bars, are the mean monthly river stage in 2023. So you can see it increased January through March, where it reached its highest mean monthly river stage of 11.6 feet. April was essentially the same, and then we started to decline, and the river remained low, really July through the end of the year, reaching its lowest mean monthly river stage in December. It was 2.4 feet. So rainfall can also significantly impact salinity. the 2023 drought is a really good indication of when you don't have rainfall, how that can cause an increase in salinity in the basin. And we'll be seeing that in later slides. On the other side, when you have a rainy year, that can help to lower salinities in the basin. Quickly go over our operational plan. We'll be talking more about this at the end of this presentation. But we have two primary gauges that we operate off of. One that's further north in the basin, one that's a little further south. We use a 10-year monthly mean salinity to develop the range that we're targeting when we are monitoring for salinity. We use a 14-day salinity moving average to track within that range. We have a low salinity trigger that signals when we return to base flow operations if we are pulsing at the time. And our base flow operations at this diversion is 1,000 CFS. So the low salinity trigger is going to be either the higher of -1 standard deviation of that 10-year monthly mean, which is the gray line on this graph. That's the monthly mean. So either that or the 5 parts per thousand, or 5 parts per thousand. So the red area, anywhere within that red area, is when we would reduce to 1,000 CFS if we were pulsing at that time. We also have 3 wildlife and fisheries consult periods. One is March through April, that's for shrimp, and then we have one that's May through July and September through November, and those are both for oysters. So I mentioned we have 2 primary gauges we use for operations. This graph shows where the gauges are located. We have one that's on the 15 part per thousand isohaline, and we use Grantaire to monitor salinity when we're operating off of that isohaline. Then we have one that's further north on the 5 part per thousand isohaline, and that one's Bay Dobery. So Grantaire is used January through May and December, then we switch to Dobery for June through November. We also have 2 reference gauges that are located between those lines. We use Hackberry Bay and Mud Lake, and those are used primarily if one of the gauges goes down, we'll have one of these as a backup, and we also use them just to get a more general range of salinities in the basin. These gauges are all real time and all the data are available online. We additionally have our discharge gauge that's located about maybe half a mile or so from the actual diversion structure. That's not shown on here, but that is also a real-time gauge. So anyone can go online and see how we're operating at any time. So start looking at the Grantaire gauge and how salinities were for that gauge for 2023. Again, this uses the 14-day salinity moving average. That's the red line that you see on the graph, and discharge is the blue line that you see on the graph. The 2 shaded areas, January through June and in December, is when we were targeting operations using this Grantaire gauge. So the annual mean throughout the entire year was 24.2 parts per thousand. It's pretty saline. When we're looking at 15 being the general salinity that we're looking for. When the gauge was used for operations, so again, that's January through May and December, the mean salinity was a little bit lower. It was 22 parts per thousand. The height of the drought hadn't really kicked in yet, except in December it had, but most of our operational time for this gauge was prior to the drought getting really extreme. So we operated within the range 66% of the time, and we were above the range 34% of the time. And that was primarily during that December month, where the diversion was closed during that time. So we were unable to operate then. Looking at the data now, it does appear as if we could have increased operations in May. We rose above the upper limit of the range there, and we had enough head differential in the river that we could have increased operations to some degree. It became more difficult later in the year as that head differential declined, and once we got to like July, August, it became difficult to even at some point get our base flow of 1,000 CFS. Had to be careful not to have backflow during that time. We'll switch to the other gauge, Bay Dogri, which is further up in the basin. That is the gauge we use when we're targeting salinities around the 5 part per thousand isohaline. The annual mean salinity for this gauge was 14 parts per thousand, so considerably higher than 5 parts per thousand. When it was used for operations, again, that's the shaded area on the graph, and that's June through November, it was really high. It was 20 parts per thousand then. Again, this was when we were really in the midst of the drought. The river stage was extremely low. And then the latter half of that time period, we were unable to operate the diversion. It was closed at that point. So salinities were quite high. We were above the upper range 100% of the time for operations. And this graph just is to show you, this is the mean salinity at each of the 4 real-time gauges that we use. If you look at 2023, where the star is, and these are mean annual salinities, you can see since we started using these gauges in 2008, salinities were higher in 2023 than they've been on record. So it was a very significant drought in the basin, and it really did increase salinities. All right, so with the gauges, we can see salinity at specific locations, but in order to get a more general idea of salinities within the entire basin, went ahead and did an interpolation of salinity at each of our 69 salinity gauges in the basin. The graph here is based on annual salinities. So each dot, there's an annual salinity that was used to create this map. Blue is the freshest, red is the most saline. The freshest salinities we had, mean salinity for the year was 0.3. That was located, it's hard to see on here, but up towards Des Allemands. It's the station that's the most north and to the west, and also right at the outfall of the Davis Pond diversion. It was saltiest right here at this station, and that station is located at Caminada Pass. And salinity there was 26.4. What you can see from this map is we do have the freshening influence from the Mississippi River, where salinities were lower down there. And generally, the salinities follow a declining salinity, obviously, from north to south. For the year, the solid lines, the black solid line is our 15 part per thousand established target isohaline. The green one is our 5 part per thousand established target isohaline, and then the dashed lines are the interpolated lines, so the actual calculated salinities for the year. So if you look at the 15 part per thousand line, for the year it moved about 11 miles up basin of the target, and it actually overlapped our 5 part per thousand target line. Our 5 part per thousand line might have said 15, moved 15 miles up basin as well. So take home message with this one is it was a salty year. Also interpolated salinities during the time that we used the 2 different gauges. So this map shows salinity from January through May and December when we used the Grand Terre gauge for operations. So during this time, we're operating off of the 5 part per thousand isohaline. The mean salinity at the Grand Terre gauge, which is labeled on this map, was 21.6 parts per thousand during that time, so it was elevated. The interpolated 5 part per thousand line moved about 5 miles upwards in the basin. And so it was saltier than intended, but it hadn't reached yet the full drought, the full impacts from the drought yet. The full impacts from the drought can be seen more in this map. So this was from June through November when we used the Bay-Dogri gauge, which targets the 5 part per thousand line. So during this time, June through November, the Bay-Dogri mean salinity was 20.5 parts per thousand, extremely salty. And the interpolated line where we measured this, it actually moved 19 miles, approximately 19 miles up from the target line up into like Lake Salvador area. The 15 part per thousand line also moved up quite far, and it moved north of the 5 part per thousand line up to around Little Lake. So very extreme drought conditions here. And it was the third lowest rainfall that we've seen. This is measured at the New Orleans International Airport since 1948. We had a total of 39.9 inches of rain, and that was only 1 inch more than the lowest amount of rain recorded since 1948. We'll talk a little bit about vegetation. So I took a look at vegetation at 2 different CRIM sites in the ponding area. We looked at CRIMS 3169, which is in the direct flow path of the diversion, and it's where we're seeing the most impacts from the diversion. The other site that we looked at is further south, that's CRIMS 3166. It's outside of the direct flow path, but it is receiving sediment and nutrients, especially when we're flowing at a higher discharge, when we're pulsing. The one thing to point out about CRIMS 3169, and I know some of you all have actually been out there and been able to see this firsthand, is that this site has transitioned from floating marsh to attached marsh to now a developing forest. And because we have so many trees coming in, we've established a second monitoring transect at this site to track the growth of trees. Where all the trees are tagged, we're now measuring DBH, and we'll be tracking the movement of new trees and growth into this area. So it's really impressive to see. Just very quickly, just wanted to show, you can see the black on this graph, and this is the stacked percent covers of all the species that are surveyed at CRIMS 3169 every year since 2008. The highest cover now that we're having at this station, and this is our marsh transect out there, is black willow. So it's now, this site is transitioning to a forested site. It was first noted in 2012, and that was after several years of higher diversion flow. We were operating a little bit more than. Tree cover is increasing at the site, and herbaceous cover is starting to decline. And that just follows a natural trajectory of an area that is transitioning to a forested community because you're having more canopy cover, it's shading out the herbaceous vegetation below. It's a natural transition. It is mainly black willow that we're seeing, but there are other woody species that are being noted both inside and outside of monitoring plots, and those include the shrub baccharis, wax myrtle, buttonbush, and red mulberry we're starting to see as well, which is great. It's a really good tree for birds. For our forested transect that we established, the first year we monitored that was 2021, and between 2021 and 2023, our canopy cover, our mean canopy cover at that site increased from 27% to 44%. So we're definitely seeing an increase, and we had 77 black willow that were tagged in the area. So I'm really looking forward to this area developing beyond black willow, which is a species that comes in aggressively when you have conditions that are right, that are newly right, for the establishment of woody vegetation. In time, that's going to transition to a more diverse community. All right, and briefly, this is the site, CRIMS 3166, that was located further south in the ponding area and received less of that direct input. As you can see here, this is a fresh marsh with bull tongue, cut grass, and dotted smartweed as the main species. It's not seeing that transition to forested habitat at this point. There was a slight decline in cover in 2023, probably because of the drought, but there was also a prescribed, there's a burn in the area in preparation for a planting of bald cypress trees. So that may have also impacted cover that year. But overall cover is strong and this site does seem to be doing quite well, just not transitioning to a forest. Next, we'll go over wildlife and fisheries summary. So Wildlife and Fisheries collects data across the coast for management of wildlife and fisheries. So opening of seasons, establishing regulations for different species, determining population size. All of the data that's presented here was collected for, the fisheries data was collected through fisheries independent monitoring. All of the data also are available for download through SAMS if you want to go ahead and really dig into the data. And you can also get more information from the 2023 annual report. We have, they provide a report every year for us that summarizes fisheries in the basin, which is very helpful. So start with waterfowl. Wildlife and Fisheries collects, they do aerial surveys annually in September, November, December, and January. In the 2023-2024 survey, there were 2,900 birds counted. Most of them were counted during the January survey. Of the species counted, the most prevalent were American coot, and then skunk, which includes lesser and greater combined together because you can't detect them from the sky. They're very similar. And blue-winged teal. And the highest number counted was in fresh marsh. If you look at counts over time, counts have been low and below the long-term average really since about 2015, 2016 season. And they've remained low. We did have a significant drop for the 2021-2022 season, which is likely due to Hurricane Ida impacts. And between 2022 and 2023, we had about a 10% decline in counts. Alligators. Department of Wildlife and Fisheries conducts aerial surveys annually along established transects in the basin. This survey in 2023 was conducted January 24th through 2026. There were 310 nests counted along the transects. Most of them were in fresh marsh, about 62% of them. And there was an increase from 2022, about a 16% increase, with the greatest increase occurring in intermediate marsh. So numbers have been high, they've been remaining high. 2022 is when the Davis Pond diversion started operating, and there has been an uptick in numbers since then. And past 5 years, have seen the 4 of the 5 highest counts for alligators in the basin since 1998. The graph on the bottom shows the number of nests that are just within that ponding area, and it appears as if they might be starting to increase within that area. They have been pretty stable for a while, but we might be seeing an uptick of nests, which could be due to the increasing marsh, the increase in land that we're having in that area. Okay. So for oysters, they use, Wildlife and Fisheries uses square meter sampling to assess resources on public seed grounds. There are 8 stations in Hackberry Bay and 1 station in Barataria Bay. July is when they do their typical sampling, but through a separate swamp sampling program, they also did sampling in May and September. So the thing to see from this one is both seed and sac declined if you look at the July sampling event, But for the May sampling event, there was actually an increase for seed between 2022 and 2023. And for the September sampling, there was an increase both in seed and in sac. And the increase was pretty strong. It increased from, in 2022, seed was 1,712 barrels, and that increased in 2023 to 23,082. And for sac in 2022, it was 937, and it increased to 4,122 in 2023. If you look at changes in comparison to the last 10 years, the 2023, and this is with the July sampling only, not the additional swamp samplings, the 2023 seed stock declined 47%, or was 47% below the previous 10-year average. And the 2023 sac stock was 61% below the 10-year previous average. So there was a decline in both seed and sac in 2023 over 2022. So brown shrimp are the dominant shrimp that are landed for the spring inshore season, which is typically May through July. We look at data here for 50-foot seines, 16-foot trawls, and 6-foot trawls. So it was above the long-term average in the 50-foot seines and in the 16-foot trawls, and just below the long-term average for the 6-foot trawls. Numbers are still really high for the 50-foot seine. There was a slight decline from 2022, but still looking good. The changes the other 2 years weren't quite as significant. There was an increase in the 6-foot trawls. Increase is more significant when you're looking at white shrimp. That is the dominant shrimp that is landed for the fall inshore season. So we're looking at mid-August to mid-December. This is the time of year when we were having the higher salinities in the basin, which might explain why we see some of these higher counts here. For the 50-foot seine in 2023, the catch per unit effort was 15.8. That's the second highest that has been recorded since the highest was recorded in 1990. 16-foot trawls, we had the third highest number recorded in 2023, and in the 6-foot trawls, we had the second highest catch per unit effort since 1971. Blue crabs, on the other hand, declined in both gear types from 2022. In 50-foot seines, the catch per unit effort was 1.8, and it was the lowest that's been recorded since 2010. It did drop below the long-term average. And in the 16-foot trawls, catch per unit effort was 2.3, what's been below the long-term average since 2014. So no real significant change there, but a slight decline from 2022. For largemouth bass, a fresher species, counts remained low in gill nets, very low. There were none caught in 2023, but in 2022 there were only 3 caught in that sampling gear. For the 50-foot seines, there were 11 caught in 2023 and 4 in 2022. So there was a slight increase, but nothing really significant here. In 2023, for the 50-foot seines, the catch per unit effort was equal to the long-term average. There was a slight increase in that gear type. For red drum, again, nothing really significant here. In gill nets in 2023, there were 41 fish caught. In 2022, there were 26. So there was a slight increase in 2023. In trammel nets, the catch per unit effort in 2023 was 1.1, And that was up a bit from 2022. The catch per unit effort was 0.3. And it did increase above the long-term average in trammel nets. And the last species we'll look at are spotted sea trout or speckled trout. Yes, a more marine estuarine sort of species. Counts remained below the long-term average in both gill nets and trammel nets. There was a slight increase in gill nets. Catch per unit effort in 2023 was 3.4, up from 2.5 in 2022. And in the trammel net, there was a slight decline in catch per unit effort. But again, the numbers of fish we're looking at are very small. 4 fish were caught using this gear type in 2023, and in 2022 there were 6. So only a decline of 2 fish between years. So in summary, the first half of the year, salinity in the Barataria Basin was largely within the ranges that we're targeting at the gauge that we're using for operations. But the second half of the year, salinity increased dramatically due to the drought, due to low river, and due to the ability or the inability to be able to really operate the diversion. 2023 had the highest annual salinity at all gauges, at the 4 gauges that we use for operations since they came online in 2008. Diversion could likely have been run a bit higher, so above base flow, early in the summer before the low river stage started really impacting our operations, our ability to operate in July and August. But the one thing that really gets us is because these diversions are gravity fed when the river is low and when we typically would really like to be able to increase operations, we're unable to operate them at that point because of the loss of that head differential. And diversion operations are really resulting in a transition of vegetation in the ponding area, where we're seeing a deposition of mineral sediment, fine mineral sediment, in that area that is allowing for the buildup of land, for the solidification of land, and allowing for the expansion of forested communities, which is really great to witness. And that's everything.
Thank you, Danelle, for that thorough report from the technical working group. With that, I'll open it up to any questions that the committee may have for Danielle for this report. Thank you. Hearing none, we will move on to item number 6, the presentation of the 2025 draft operations plan. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to Danielle.
The technical work group met in November to discuss our operations plans that we wanted to propose for the DPAC and for the SEAC. And we had originally thought of maybe changing or proposing a change to operations for Davis Pond, but decided against it. We are implementing a revised plan for the Breton Sound Basin for Carnarvon, which is a basin that is undergoing change with a drop in salinity occurring largely due to the input of more and more fresh water through the passes on the east side of the river. Davis Pond's been a lot more stable. We're not seeing that sort of decline in salinity in the basin. And so we are proposing to follow the same operational format that we have been using the last few years. However, based on how things go with this first year, 2025, of Carnarvon operations using a revised plan, we may explore implementing a similar sort of revised plan next year. But for now, what we're proposing is to continue to use the 2 gauges, to use Grand Terre, January through May and December, and use the Dogri gauge June through November. We'll continue to operate based on a 10-year monthly mean with a range above that mean that is plus or minus one standard deviation of that monthly mean. Continue to have a low trigger that is going to be either the higher of that lower range around the mean or 5 parts per thousand. So the red area there is when we would not operate. Continue to have 1,000 base flow, 1,000 CFS base flow operations. Continue to implement our 3 coordination periods with Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. So March through April is primarily for shrimp, and then May through June and September through October, coordination periods are focused on oysters. The only change to this plan is that 10-year monthly mean has been updated to include now the next year of data. So it'll include through 2024. So there's a shift in the range, but everything else has stayed the same. So that is what we're proposing to you all this year.
Thank you, Danielle, for that update. With that, I'd like to take a motion to enter into discussions on the proposed operations plan. All right. Motion to enter into discussion. Does anybody on the committee have any discussion items they'd like to raise on the proposed operations plan?
Yes, I have one question. The Carnarvon, I know this is Davis Pond Committee meeting, but what is the main change they made to the Carnarvon?
Sure, yeah. So there's a few changes that are being made. One is we're switching, instead of using the 2 gauges that are the 5 and the 15, we're opting to use a gauge that is more located mid-basin and use that year-round. So that's one of the changes. The other change that's significant is instead of using the 10-year monthly mean to develop our range for operations, we are using a range that was provided by Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries that is focused on tolerance levels for oysters. So taking more a fisheries-based approach to operations rather than our historical salinities for the past 10 years.
Okay, thank you.
This spring, when y'all didn't operate when y'all could,
Yeah, last year.
yeah. What is that, just somebody not paying attention to salinities, or, because I personally feel it could actually operate more. Now, I only look at real-time data, I'm not looking at 10-year averages when I'm monitoring salinities. I think there's opportunities for more operations inside the salinity regime we already have for more flow. And that's what I say, I don't know if whoever says open and close or increase and decrease is monitoring based on a 10-year average or, the actual, I'm just looking day to day, week to week. And there's a lot of times where the stations are a lot higher where we could get flow. Now, I know this year was a drought, but overall, that's why I was trying to say, in that one time where we could have operated,
Right.
but why wasn't it ocean, so to
So
say?
this was 2023.
Pretty right.
And for one thing, I think if we would have seen how bad the drought was going to get, I think we probably would have pushed to operate it more early on. It also, that time was during a coordination period as well. John, you might be able to speak a little bit more to that since I wasn't.
Yeah, Pete, that's a good question, and we've thought about that quite a bit. And the one point to make, and this is for us as well, I'm not calling you out on this, it's a lot easier after the fact see and say, oh wow, salinities really ran high. Well, by the time they started running that high, like you said, we had maybe an opportunity in the spring to do so. If Danielle will pull up the graph, the variation there, I mean, even all the way into June or July, you get the 2-week moving average is sloping down below the average which is there in our range. And given that slope, we have to make a call every week. We meet every week and we talk about salinity ranges, averages, all that good stuff. And we have to make a call on what to do. And so, yeah, on that point, and generally, and I had a couple other points to make too. I wrote them down real quickly. So the other one is temperature. And this committee has brought it out many times when we consult with wildlife and fisheries. Of course, there's a temperature interaction with a lot of the fisheries species. So obviously, why we shoot for operating more during the winter when the temperatures are colder. So when we get into the summer and we get really hot temperatures, that can actually cause some problems. But, that said, in hindsight, yeah, we probably should have operated more in the spring, and it was just a judgment call that we made.
And I'm
Didn't get-
not good.
I know you're not.
asking,
I just,
you
for
know,
the record and for everyone that,
Right.
that's kind of how the sausage is made, or the process that we use.
Because from the conception, from the beginning, I've been hearing it. This always seems like we could have squeezed more
Yes.
operation in, and that way I don't have to battle off the people who want more, so to say, they're gonna kill the oysters.
But duly noted, I mean, it's in this drought. Then when you get into the summer, we can't do anything.
Right.
And that's the unfortunate thing, the way it was designed. And but that's still not a bad thing.
Yeah,
You think
no,
about the
no.
estuary, you have wet years, dry years, and that's all goes into the mix. So we'll do better next year.
Same thing, I tried, had around that time when it was, tried to get the parish to open West Point Latch, which would affect the salinities.
Right.
In that same area, which was done, but there was no interest in kind of doing that. So,
Okay.
appreciate it.
Quick question, John. I know it's not a one-to-one comparison, because head differentials going to depend not just on the river, but heights in the basin, but
Right.
do you have a general idea of what the gauge height, say, maybe at Carrollton is, below which you can't operate?
Yes, Michael, you're right. We use Carrollton as the gauge, but of course Davis Pond is higher in the river setting. When we get around 4 feet, 3.5, 4, I'm gonna look at David, our engineer over here, about right. So that's when you're competing with the head differential that's on the ponding side. So that's kind of where our limit is, where we start to have trouble in putting any significant water in. I mean, we can put 2,000 cubic feet per second above the base flow of 1,000, but for the issue we had in the basin with salinities encroaching so high, there was not an opportunity at that point. So I meandered a little bit, but to bring to your point, 3.5, 4 feet is kind of the trigger.
Thank you. Great questions. With that, we will move to item 7, public comment. So I'll open it up to public comment now. Yeah, if you don't mind, come up to the mic and provide your comments. Yeah, and if you don't mind, also state your name for the record.
Yes, good morning. My name is Clyde Maddox. First thing I'd like to do is thank all of you for participating on this council. And I know it takes a lot of time out of your lives, and not all of y'all are getting paid today to do it. So thank you very much. I live in the community of Bayou Gauche, which is on the upper end of the Barrett area estuary there. And I've hunted and fished the Davis Pond area for probably 35, 40 years. So I've seen the impact. I've seen the ecosystem before the diversion, during the diversion, and where it's at right now. I'm not here to represent any particular group or any foundation. I'm just one data point of the thousands of recreational users that this project influences. I'm glad to see that we have a representative, even though I don't know him personally, for the recreational users in this group. But I was wondering, is there any possible way, and this isn't necessarily the Davis Diversion Project, but could we get a salinity monitoring station? That we have a NOAA monitoring system there in Bayou Gauche, monitors the tide. And this summer, my neighbor that works at a chemical plant, he got a water sample. And there's no way that I could verify this because I didn't run the test myself. But he brought it to the plant and he checked it, and it was about 20 parts per thousand up in the Desalmans area. And so, once again, I can't verify those results. But for every reaction, there's a reaction. One thing is, we didn't have a water hyacinth problem this year because salinity levels were that high. But I had an impact in the Salvador game management area where I hunt, because everybody's concentrated in one pond because it's offset, where we now have a flow from the Gulf Canal from Lake Cotahuasi all the way into Valle des Almas there. And so that high salinity water flows back and forth, and it decimated all the aquatic vegetation except for that one pond. Bass, they exist in 0 to 10 parts per 1,000, and that's where the upper estuary should be. And I know that, not only the fish kills during storms, but these high salinity levels have had a huge impact on our freshwater species on that end. And so, not so much what we can do today, but this group going forward, we'd love to see a diversion come into the uppermost ends of the system there. I was so happy that we got the diversion itself. I just wish that we had the ability to move water from the river even when we are at such low levels, because that's when we need them the most. But I've certainly seen a huge impact on the upper end towards Valle des Almas and Lake des Almas. And, I guess my only message to you here today in the spirit of Christmas is let it flow, let it flow, let it flow. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maddox, for your comments. Yep, certainly taking that into account. And we will look at the salinity gauge and get back to you on that request.
Hello, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Captain Ryan Lambert. Been a guide for 47 years, but I grew up in St. George Parish, where I still live today. I've hunted and fished every inch of the swamps and bayous and lakes around there. I'll suggest to you that restoration and erosion is only relative to your age and what you've seen. And being the diversion only came into operation in 2002 and really not till 2009. I say we have failed. The operation that we're using is failing. Doesn't matter, all the academics in the world and where you have crimp stations and saltwater stations, the operation that we're doing is failing. Everything is eroding, everything is dying. There's no SABs, 2,900 ducks, and 1,200 of them was pool dew. Back in the day, the sky was black with ducks, aquatic vegetation everywhere. They had a duck blind every 100 yards in the bayou. There's no more blinds. There's no more people at the launches. The oak trees are all dead. That's the canary in the coal mine. The swamps where I camped out as a kid was 2 foot deep right now. I'd throw a sleeping bag on the ground and just go to sleep, get up in the morning, walk in the swamp and kill mallards. It's 2 foot underwater. I can't even go there anymore because these little knees can't go in that slop. That's how bad. There's no more ridges. So take in the feet by Puro. That's all gone. All that land is gone, and that's all gone every single day. And now that we lost 104 square miles because of idling outside, the saltwater is encroaching so much that the catfishmen in the Zalmas are having to abandon their traps because they're so full of barnacles. Barnacles don't grow in fresh water. We have to reevaluate how we're running it because we're failing. It's eroding. Look at Bayou. The oak tree that was on the islands is sitting out in the middle of the bayou. At what point do we decide that we failed? If those sites are true to what we think they are, it's not good enough because we're losing everything. I didn't notice crawfish on there. We used to go at the Willardale Boulevard in August when the rain came, it would be red with crawfish, thousands and thousands. You go, you set a crawfish trap in any swamp, anywhere around here, you can catch your sacks of crawfish. There's no more crawfish. There's no more nothing. And now the saltwater, we're gonna kill the oak tree, cypress decks, then we have no more buffer. The water's on the levees. Our insurance is going up $4,000 a year. Now we gotta build what, for 6 feet now? It's time to change something because we failed.
We appreciate the comments, Mr. Lambert. I think as Danielle demonstrated, we're going to continue to look for ways to maximize operation. One thing, that I would like to mention is we have been engaged with the Corps since 2014 and through a WRDA process to reevaluate the optimization of the operations plan. So that is continuing, and so we'll look for ways to optimize the operations of this project. And that's a federally authorized study that CPRA is working with the Corps on. And so some of the comments that you made, we certainly appreciate and hope to address that in that project modification study. Thank you.
May I respond?
Yes.
Just like, I don't think Davis Pond has failed. Now, you might be talking about the whole coastal restoration scenario, we're not getting it. But everything you tried to lay in the lap of Davis Pond was never created to do that. I don't consider Davis Pond a failure. I consider it a pretty damn good success. From the time when it was implemented, when saltwater was way past up at Little Lake, up until Lake Design was a lot more than it was today. Now, I mean, it might have got it this way, but it's been a tremendous, I think, asset to where the cypress trees ain't dying as much as they used to. You can't expect Davis Pond to stop the erosion further down south in the estuary. I mean, really only in reality in the containment pond. So, I understand your comments, but I don't appreciate it being thrown in the fact that saying that this diversion is a failure, because this little diversion isn't going to save Barataria Bay. It was only meant to increase and extend the productivity for another 50 years or enhance the productivity.
Well, the most basic thing that I think is the failure is that we're worried about the lower end of the estuary for oysters and shrimp, while we forget about the north end of the estuary for bass and crawfish and ducks and recreational fishing, which is a great economic impact. Huge.
Hey, Ryan, would you mind, it's John up here. Would you mind, you were walking not in front of the mic, would you mind starting over, please?
Yeah, I say that it's a failure because we concentrate more on the south end of the estuary for brown shrimp, which is an invasive species and not important enough for either one of our shrimp people to even be here today. Every shrimper I know lost money on brown shrimp this year. Opening day of the brown shrimp season, fishing on the east side of the river, which flows 500,000 CFS. Shrimp load after shrimp load after shrimp load past me all day. 50 or 60 of them pass through Neptune just to get out there and fish the fresh water. So, are we ruining everything to the north because of a 50-cent brown shrimp? Because I say bass and sockeye and brim and catfish and ducks are worth more than that. So we have to concentrate more on the north end of that story because that's essentially what we're losing. Can we do both? I don't know. I think that the linear tides will keep the fresh water going towards the west, and the Empire Bureau's oysters will be just fine. Brown shrimp, they're going to find their way. They're invasive. They found their way from Brazil. They can find their way out of 10,000 CFS and go to the west a little bit and have it Empire Bureau if they want. But we can't kill the north side of the estuary. We need to concentrate more on the things with not only more people live there, but if we lose that storm protection, there's nothing on the outside. White St. Denis, all of that's gone now because we didn't take care of it.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Lambert.
Basically, Davis Pond protects forest salinities, the northern part of Barataria Estuary. Without it, it would be less protected because there's no source other than rainfall for fresh water. Talking back in the day, I can remember back in the day when there was no diversion. There was plenty of marsh, there was plenty of oysters, there was plenty of shrimp, there was plenty of anything. But inside my experience with all that, there was always times where it peaked and then you hit valleys and things come and go. The same thing with this drought scenario. I'm not surprised by this drought scenario because this is just part of the historic cycles of what the estuary does. And I just can't see, this isn't the avenue to blame, like the Davis Pond structure, that we're losing everything, where it was an attempt to stabilize environments and, put a little sediment, a little fish, a little balance in everything. You see, and I'm not blaming the lack of oysters on the operation of Davis Pond diversion. I think in actuality, it's actually stabilized and kept the oyster population further south than where it would be now, where it would, without Davis Pond, it would be way up in the north, probably in the polluted area where we couldn't harvest. So this is a good balance, and
Well, it's not.
I think you're just being a little too harsh on this, where, the bigger problem statewide. I don't see, we're operating it wide open all the time is going to do any benefit, any more significant, maybe for one species here and there, but not as the whole environment and the whole balance of the estuary as a whole.
With the lack of land and all the land loss that we've had since we put the diversion in, the salt water comes in a lot easier.
But that's not Davis Pond. If we would have been operating Davis Pond the whole way, Creole Bay, Hackberry Bay, all them shorelines in the Little Lake would still be eaten away. So it's not the solver.
It'll keep the salt water at bay.
It's been keeping the salt water at bay until.
That 1,000 CFS is not doing nothing. Or
but you see,
everywhere. Mother Nature says that we're failing. Not me. Mother Nature.
we would be fair. Well, you see, okay, this is like trying to take on Russia with a BB gun. It ain't gonna happen.
No, I'll jump in here for a second, Mr. Lambert. Yeah.
And he's closed and he doesn't help you. You can't say, oh, he didn't do nothing for me. We can't run it at 1,400
Sure.
if we can run it at 8 or 7 or something to keep the salt water at bay.
But that's where the salinity regimes are. That's the barrier. If it's 5 parts, stays 5 parts per thousand, so to say, by the degree, then it should be 2, 3 parts up in Lake Salvador. There's that concave.
We would have that. The SAB takes 7 parts per thousand. We have none. So what does that tell you? Mother Nature says that we have failed.
Yeah, we appreciate.
It's not us. It's not y'all. It's the operation is not working.
Right. We appreciate the comments, Mr. Lambert and Pete. Yeah, I think certainly your point is well taken. I mean, obviously, as a CPRA, our objective here is to restore the habitat that's being lost. There's 2 things at play. One is, as we discussed, the drought season. Sometimes there are not opportunities for us to operate the structure just because of the stage in the river. But through this LCA study that we're doing with the Corps and under the word of 2014, we can look for ways to optimize that to address some of your concerns.
The only thing that the committee can do is take every opportunity, not to miss an opportunity to run it right now until we change the parameters. So
Understood.
hopefully we'll do that.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. Yes, Ms. Catherine.
You're on. Oh, yeah. Just about that study, I'm just curious. Is that the old LCA? Is it being picked back up again? Or?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, that's the original or the original project optimization study for 2014.
And is it current? You're looking at it again now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think they've been working on trying to get to for the Corps to express capability over the last couple of years. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matthew Joel. I'm St. Charles Parish President. I also represent the Barataria Basin on CPRA. Just want to come and talk as the Parish President of St. Charles Parish that I'm concerned about our parish's coastline. I'm concerned about our recreational fishermen, and I'm concerned about our commercial cat fishermen. As you all know, Des Allemands was designated as the catfish capital of the universe. And we are seeing, and I think Hurricane Ida and of course the drought that we had last year had a significant impact on this, but we're seeing cat fishermen who are looking for freshwater catfish with barnacles on their cages. People catching hardheads in areas of this upper Barataria Basin where we should not be catching hardhead catfish. So I only stand here to say that I believe that I agree with the gentleman who was just speaking earlier, that Davis Pond is a success. We see how much success and how healthy that immediate estuary is right outside of the ponding area or in the ponding area. I went back and looked at historical images all the way back to about 1951 that I could find, probably taken from a high aerial, an airplane. And you could see that in the 50s that this was nice, solid prairie. And you could see over time how it became open water. And now it is on its way back to being that forest, that solid area. And you see the trees growing. I think the only reason you don't see trees growing at that lower CRIM station yet is because we don't operate it as aggressively as we should. I think we're a little bit too conservative on that. I understand that there's an operational regime in place. And I also am sympathetic to the fact that when we look back in hindsight, that we say, oh, shoot, well, we probably could have. And it's hard to predict Mother Nature. But I would think that that if we can look at the year's worth of data and we know that in multiple years, we look back and say, hey man, we probably could have run it a little bit harder. Well, let's run it a little bit harder. Let's look at how we can increase the flow and lean towards letting it run rather than shutting it down, and kind of changing our mindset on that. Because as the gentleman said, I haven't been fishing back there for 40 years and hunting back there for 40 years. I've only been hunting and fishing back there for like 20 years. But there was a big change in some of those areas that we're seeing that don't get the benefit of the freshwater from Davis Diversion versus the areas that are getting that benefit. So I just stand here to say that there's a concern. I think the fortification of that marsh definitely helped us during Hurricane Ida. I couldn't imagine the additional land loss we would have had if that 500 acres was open, the amount of water it would have put on our levees. The immediate area behind Willowdale and Willow Ridge, it's not on that map here, but we didn't have barely any water on our levees back there for Hurricane Ida. Further down the basin, outside of where, and further along our levee alignment, we had a lot of water, And so I think that when we look at coastal restoration, and we have to look at it in an all of the above approach, there's definitely a place for dredging where we need immediate barrier. There's definitely a place for rocks, and I know if Gordy was here, he would be cheered, because we got to have that protection component. Remember, we're spending millions of dollars rebuilding marsh. We got to put something in place to armor it. And then I think the foundation of a lot of our coastal restoration projects, and really the foundation of our coast, because there's no dispute on how the coast was created. The Mississippi River, throughout millennia, whipped back and forth and deposited sediment. So the coast, the freshwater reintroductions to these areas, we just cut the ribbon on Maurepas. That is the foundation of all of these other projects. And I just think we need to make sure that we keep that in mind and try to work with everybody as we rebuild the coast. If we're going to sit here and fight back and forth and only take the opinion of one group over the opinion of other groups, we're just, we might as well just pack up and move now. So thanks for all that this committee does. And John, thank you for everything that you do. I'm hoping we can build more of these, more like Maurepas, maybe one in Edgard that gets us even higher up in the Barataria Basin. I want John Fogarty over at the spillway to be very bored. I want him to never have to open that spillway ever again. And I think we can achieve that, or help achieve that, by diverting water in strategic ways and helping restore these basins. Thanks.
Thank you, President Jewell. Comments are well received. As we said, we'll do everything we can through our technical working group and this committee to optimize operations under this regime. Obviously, conduct the study through the LCA process for future modifications. And then all of the additional work that we're doing is to hopefully address your concerns and the concerns of your parish. And then also, as you said, the work that we do here, not only does it provide habitat and restoration, it also provides resiliency to your communities. So that's well done.
And I just want to welcome, want to invite the committee to have this meeting in St. Charles Parish. Maybe the next time that you meet, we'd be happy to host you all. Happy to have you hear from some more of the recreational fishermen and commercial fishermen, and the people who go out and enjoy this area, and let you hear from them as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate that invitation. We'll get back to you on that. With that, any other public comments? Hearing none, we will move into item 8. This is the roll call vote on the recommended operations plan for 2025 as presented. And so with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Trotman to do a roll call vote.
Can I interject? Like inside this vote, could we possibly include it as a possible mentality for a more aggressive operation than the basic operation? Or just
You good?
So,
with the theory of, or say with the thought in mind of possibly a little bit more of an aggressive, take advantage of the opportunities when you see the salinities coming up, stuff like that. Just, I know it's not in the, it's not going to be in the salinity regime or whatever, an operational plan, but just maybe as membership as a whole.
Yeah, and I think you're voting on the operations plans as presented, but yeah, what to John's point earlier is that is we'll take a closer look at the 14-day moving average and make sure that we're operating it as we can and do that within the framework of this plan.
So let me still add something. So the motion on the table, and so this is the Robert's rules following these type of meetings that we try to follow as best we can. So the motion on the table was to accept the plan as is. And we've had a discussion and we need to vote on that. An alternative, well, we need to vote on that, but you could make an alternative motion. Or if.
No, I didn't want to go that far. I just kind of wanted to maybe emphasize a little bit of, instead of changing all the names and all that kind of stuff. So emphasize a little more aggressive operation.
From a marsh landowners representative, representing these people as well, can we do that? I'll make the motion.
I mean, I think, and this is, again, a technical meeting thing when we have this one meeting here. So it's not material change to the plan, but I think it could be an amended motion, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I'd
You
like
can
to
amend the
make an
motion
amended
or
motion
supplant the motion for a different one?
Yes, sir.
But I think technically we're gonna have to vote on the other one.
Just fine. I mean,
Is it an amendment though, or is it just your tendency is to be conservative? When you have a chance, you're like, well, we're not sure, so let's not. And we're saying, well, if you're not sure, try it.
Right.
So it's within the window of what we're voting on still.
That
But when you don't
It
know,
is.
there is a question, yes or no, should we flow? Maybe tend towards yes, try it this year that way,
Yeah, that was my understanding. Is the plan as shown is still the plan. It's just I guess taking a more aggressive approach at looking at that 14-day average and making those decisions to open or not open is what we're talking about.
and I'm assuming an amendment would be necessary for that? Or
Should have
not?
brought my lawyer.
It's just, we have a lot of concerns here, and even Pete's saying he's fine with it, and he's with the oyster industry, and they would, could have some impacts, which naturally you wouldn't at Fort South. But
So we do have an item, Frank, of new business.
Yeah.
We could take it up. You can bring it up as a committee member of a new item of business, introduce it.
Okay.
And then we can make a board resolution at that point. And that's more fitting of what you guys are saying, in my opinion.
So with that, we'll proceed with the roll call vote on the recommended operations plan as presented for 2025.
Okay, turn my mic off. Okay, I'm gonna go back down the list, indicate yay or nay, for or against. So U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is not voting, I'm sorry. Right, you were abstaining? Did I get that correctly?
Yes.
Yep, sorry, so abstain. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Kathy? NRCS, John Boatman?
Yay.
Environmental Protection Agency, role.
Yay.
National Marine Fisheries Service, Dawn.
Yay.
DE&R, Sarah.
Yay.
Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, Connor. DHH is not here. DEQ, Jeff. Okay. St. Charles Parish Government, Marnie. Where's she
That's going to be against.
Against. Okay. Lafourche Parish Government, Megan. Jefferson Parish. Plaquemines Parish. Oyster Fisheries, Pete.
Yay.
Marsh Property Owners, Frank.
Against.
We don't have the two upper and lower basin shrimp, and recreational fisheries, Maurice. And then Bidnap, Michael. Yay. That's 12. Yay and 5 against, so we do passes.
Passes 12 to 5. All right. And so moving on to new business items, I think there was a proposal potentially to have a new business item. So I'll open it up to the committee for any proposals there.
I'd like to make a proposal that we run the system more aggressively in the future, whenever possible. So however we would need to word that, but that's what I would suggest.
Yes, so would the proposal be a new business in 2025 to operate it aggressively within the framework of the proposed and past operations plan?
Yes, sir, at this point, yes.
Yep. John, do we need a resolution of the board?
I think it would be a good idea at this point to do that, document it through a resolution. Yep. And so, to not wordsmith it, but basically you want to repeat what you said, Frank, since you're making.
Yes, I would like to amend that we run the system more aggressively according to the plan that's in the system right now.
You said within the system.
Yes, sir.
So Pete, that's in line with what you were saying. I guess the committee, is that good enough wording? Do we want to work on it at this point?
Need a second before we discuss it.
Yeah, we should.
Well, I'll second it then.
Okay, got a motion and a second from Pete and Maurice. Okay, so on the table was basically to run the diversion more aggressively within the current plan. Yes, sir. Yep.
So we'll do a simple majority vote. All in favor, yay.
Yay.
All opposed? And so the motion passes, the resolution on new business as demonstrated. So with that, that concludes our agenda for today. Yeah, we appreciate the great dialogue. Obviously, it's a balancing act for all of the stakeholders, but I think everybody that comes here today, our missions are the same for really improving our coastal areas in Louisiana. And so we appreciate all of the feedback and work that y'all do, especially the committee. So thank you. With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn the meeting. Second. And appreciate everybody. The meeting is adjourned. Everyone have a great day. Great holiday season. Thank you.